Well, DevCentral community, I'm John, and this is Jason, and this is a special edition, a limited edition, dare I say, of DevCentral Connects. And it's another chance for us to, connect with all of you, the DevCentral community. And as we always do, we're streaming live to YouTube and LinkedIn and Periscope and all the places. So it's going to be a great one today. We're talking about automation and orchestration. And we've got three of the greatest minds at F5. They've automated everything in their life, So
all the things. That's right.
All the things. So Jason, I'm excited, man. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah. This has been in the works for a little while. The team is like, hey, we do these internally, and we work with the all the SMEs and architects and all that. And it's like, why don't we take this goodness outside the walls of F5 and share with the community? So I'm excited.
Yeah. They must. I mean, how can we not share this with the whole world? So good stuff, man. Good stuff.
You guys are always special editions. Is that a compliment? I'm not sure that's a compliment.
I'm gonna take
it's
it.
Monday, or no, it's not Monday. It's Tuesday.
No,
See,
I'm
already off.
Yeah.
It's
Jason.
we'll take it. Yeah.
I will always take it as a compliment, regardless. People can say the meanest things, and I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to take that as a compliment. So good stuff.
That's right.
Parveen.
Hey, Parveen. Hello,
see you, man.
And
Matthew.
Yep. Good to
there
see you.
Go.
That's
there
right.
you go. Yeah, it's great to see everybody out there. So yeah, so Jason, today is more of an office hours, and which makes me think back to like school, which gives me a little bit of, the consternation, a little bit of the, the jitteriness. However, today it's not like that. These are not professors who are going to give you a grade. These are awesome people who are going to say, hey, we're here to help you. So if you got questions, we're going to answer them all. So make sure you ask a lot of questions today, right?
That's right. Yeah, because if you don't ask a lot of questions, it's just going to get awkward, and nobody wants that. Right. Because this is office hours. It's like the intent, the whole purpose is you ask questions and the panel of experts answer them. And so if there are no questions, we just sit here, twiddle our thumbs. We might start singing. And, at least from my perspective, you don't want to hear that.
Jason, hey, it might go viral. You never know, man. It might be more. It might be more than you expected. So that's awesome. So, hey, really quick, just kind of the format today for everyone who's watching is, there's a couple of like presentation slides, but not that many. It's just to kind of set the stage on the content, the discussion topics, and then it's going to be free for all, every man for himself, ask all the questions you want, and then everyone will answer. Right. So,
yep. Questions about what? Okay. So yeah, this is automation and orchestration, anything automation tool chain, or maybe you want to go old school on some iControl stuff. I don't know if everybody wants to talk about those things, but certainly, we'll address those as well. So
right.
That would be the questions, and Ansible with F5 equals low. Okay. Yeah, there you go. All right.
Sushant, yeah, it's great comment.
Yep.
And I dare say, I don't even know if I should say this, but DC said, questions about what? Theoretically, you could ask a question about anything. We're just not probably going to answer anything except the automation and orchestration stuff.
That's right.
We can have good answers.
That's right. And we'll table that for another day.
Right. Right. We'll get back to you on some of those. So good stuff.
That's right. All right.
Awesome,
well,
man.
You want to get into this?
Let's get to the goodness, man.
All right. Nick, I'm going to add you because it looks like Kevin's having a little difficulty. So like, hey, let's get into this. And I look down, I'm like, Kevin is not there. So
one of the professors has left his office during office hours.
I guess he was too shy. So it's okay.
Yeah. So let's flip a little bit. Let's bring Ben on as well. And why don't we start with just a little discussion about the work that you guys have done in VS Code. And I know, Ben, you're a friend of the show. We actually just a few weeks ago, we talked about the VS Code extension, and so, not to go too far down that path, but just for the people that maybe haven't seen those shows or are here, for the first time, what is, what's VS Code and how do we play a role with that?
Right. So, starting from the beginning, VS Code is an IDE or a text editor that's used by a lot of coding languages, right? It integrates directly into the language, and it provides a lot of introspection and feedback about what you're writing. So how did the VS Code extension come around for F5 products specifically, right? What was the driving need here? And using VS Code to validate the schema, or use the schema to validate a declaration during the authoring process, was a game changer for me, right? It gave me that feedback that I needed to help me understand when I'm writing a declaration to deploy an application. I had that instant feedback to know what was the correct syntax, what were the allowed variables, and how could I add different things to the declaration. And I didn't have to go back and forth or keep sending the declaration to an AS3 service to really kind of see what was going on. So that's where I really kind of jumped into VS Code, was using the schema to validate a declaration, and then also knowing about all the other cool API functionality that you can do within VS Code and the whole extension ecosystem, and seeing what other product vendors were doing there. I started thinking about, what could we do and what kind of power could we harness if we tailored this experience for F5 products in the automated tool chain. So after a little bit of time, I was able to kind of integrate not only the schema validation for a declaration, but also having VS Code post the declarations, and then just kind of expanding from there. Really created a platform that allows you to manage author F5 code for F5 products and get it directly onto our products. And that's kind of how everything started from nothing to where we are now.
Yeah, it's really cool. I haven't done too much with the VS Code extension yet, but maybe a month and a half ago, I wrote a Python script to install all the automation things, and so went through the effort of going through all that. And but with mine, you still have to download them to your local box and then put them in a folder. Then you have to tell Python where they are, and so upload. And so I was like, oh, I felt pretty proud of myself and getting all that done. And then after our show with you, I went out and downloaded the extension, and it's like right click, boom, and then it was on my box. It's like, dang it. And it was like, but that's amazing, right? It's like it's used to, like, okay, I'm going to SCP that up, and you have to go through all that. And then mine made it a little bit easier. But yeah, the extension, it's just like, easy button for sure. And getting the extensions on the box. And then of course, the power that comes after that is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and what I really like about your extension is that you don't need to use multiple tools to do what we were used to do, like using a Python script like Jason was talking about to take care of the extension, then switch to Postman to try an AS3 declaration, validate the output, and the big IP GUI and so on. You're providing a single tool for F5 peers, but also for our customer to be able to use a single solution to take care of the life cycle, but also validate specific automation scenarios. And that's what's really compelling in my mind with your solution.
Yeah, and I'll build on that a little bit. A couple of the tools I found recently with VS Code, it's like, if you're building your own tools at the command line, it's one thing, but when you have an ecosystem with VS Code, like I found GitLens the other day, which is amazing because you can start looking at code and it's like, oh, Ben wrote this line and it's failing, so I can actually write out to Ben and say, hey Ben, I noticed in this line, it's like I'm really struggling, and this is where I'm getting stuck. You wrote it, help me out. And so it's got those blame lines right in the thing, which is amazing. They call them blame lines, but I feel like it's like, rather than the blame, it's just like I know who to go to for help, because it's like I know this guy committed the code. So that's pretty awesome. And the other one that I've been using a lot, in fact, for tomorrow or Thursday's show, I'm going to have a little Today I Learned, but it's on the Thunder client, which is pretty much Postman within VS Code. And so I was like, that's such a big win, because now I don't have to fire up the Postman to be used. So it's like, as you find more and more tools to integrate into VS Code, it's like what you were saying, Nick, you never have to leave the environment, which is, kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything you need, right? We're all trying to work this in a direction to where it's all source code based. And that way you can have everything in a repository. You have all the history, you have the approval processes, you have the get blame like you were talking about. It's all the visibility that comes with the development workflow. And now we can really start to harness that all across the products.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. Okay, I'm going to bring Kevin back in because Kevin was going to share some goodness with us about the automation tool chain and the ecosystem. And so, Kevin, you're here.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about that. I had a sort of a technical glitch at the beginning there, but I'm back. So that's quite an intro. Thanks very much for the nice intro, guys. As John had mentioned, I don't want to be killing everyone with slideware, but I do want to just provide a little bit of context so you can understand what is within the automation, orchestration, and ecosystems team product portfolio. So before I begin, let me just talk a little bit about the charter of this product team. Overall, our charter is to provide automation tools and solutions to enable our customers to very easily automate big IP deployments in private and public cloud, on-prem, in the cloud, what have you, through a number of different tools. Now, one of the things I'll say up front is one of the nice things about all these things that we're delivering is that they're all available on GitHub, and most of them the vast majority of them are supported, and they're free for our customers to make it easier for you to deploy your big IPs. Another thing I want to add up at the very front is a common theme here is around the notion of declarative APIs. So for those of you that are familiar with imperative and declarative APIs, imperative APIs is sort of the way things have been done for a very, very long time. This is the notion of doing a configuration via a number of well-known steps, it have to be in very specific order, to reach an end state. Well, what we're doing with our automation tools is we're flipping that over on its head using declarative APIs wherever it's possible. And with the declarative API, you simply state, this is my end goal, my end configuration that I want. And our tools effectively will configure the device to get it to that state, which is very cool. So in the end, if you boil it down, using the declarative APIs, you can basically configure and deploy your big IP with just one API call, which is very, very powerful. So let's talk a little bit about the portfolio and how it fits into that context. So you'll see there are a number of different product areas. So the first one we'll just briefly cover is something we call the automation tool chain. So this is a set of interrelated automation tools, again, all available on GitHub, and they each serve a very specific purpose. So Application Services 3, or you'll hear it referred to as AS3. AS3 is our declarative API that is available on Big IP, and it is used to configure all your L4 through L7 services on Big IP, and again, using one API call. Super cool. Declarative Onboarding serves a different purpose, but it works in the exact same way. And Declarative Onboarding is all about configuring all your global L1 through L3 parameters on your Big IP, so your VLANs, your self IPs, all that good stuff, to get it into a state where it's ready to accept an L4 through L7 config using AS3. Now, telemetry streaming is a little bit different of a beast. It's not really about configuration so much, but it's really about simplifying the ability to do some telemetry data export off of Big IP to a desired analytics consumer. So what's great about TS is using, again, another declarative API. All you need to do is specify what type of data do you want sent to where and what kind of consumer. And under the covers, TS does all the magic of formatting the data, normalizing the data, and sending it to that consumer for you. So you don't need to know anything about all the complexities associated with that. The only thing you need to say is, the only thing you need to configure is what kind of data, where do you want to send it, to what kind of consumer. It's really, really cool. Next is F5 Application Services Templates, or FAST. You can think of FAST as being a templating engine that rides on top of AS3. And so we have a number of customers, as we'll talk about in a bit, who are using AS3 at a pretty large scale to deploy many applications. And obviously one of the use cases that comes up is the notion of the self-service catalog. in which case you want to be able to make it easy to deploy the same type of service over and over again in a reliable and consistent way. So obviously templating is the way you want to go. And so FAST gives us a way to very easily create templates based on these, what we call AS3 declarations. FAST is cool because it's both an API and it has a GUI front end. But generally speaking, when our customers use the automation toolchain, this is really all about API first, as that's generally the requirement for an automated environment. So FAST is, again, a templating system for AS3. It's very, very cool.
Hey, can I interrupt you real quick there? And just FAST, from my understanding, it's like, so we have the IAP templates today, right? This is kind of the next gen for everything that's going to be, that either has been or will be deprecated in the IAPS world, correct?
Yes, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Jason. Yes, so FAST is the successor to our now deprecated IAP templates. Yes, so for customers who want that same sort of user experience where they get a form-based template and they just fill out, basically answer some English questions, FAST provides you the same user experience as an IAP does, except under the covers, it's using AS3.
Okay. So no more TCL and APL, right?
That is correct. That's correct. Yeah. So we can talk more about FAST, but FAST is really cool because, like you're saying, it's not using Tickle, it's not using APL. It actually is pretty advanced in the sense that it creates its own GUI and it creates its own schema based on the AS3 template that you define. So there's a lot. It's very self-contained. Okay. Also, we have the F5 As3 Configuration Converter. Now, this is an interesting tool because what this does is enables our customers to easily convert their existing big IP configurations into an AS3 declaration. So we have a number of customers who take a look at AS3 and they start using it. They start understanding, wow, this is really cool. We now start to really understand why we want to use AS3 and use a declarative API. And so for new deployments, it makes a lot of sense why you want to use AS3. But of course, our customers have a lot of existing deployments. So the big question comes up, well, gee, how do I convert my existing configurations, my bigip.conf, for example, all my TMSS configurations, into an AS3 declaration so that now I can manage that configuration using AS3. That's effectively what the ACC tool does. So what it will take as input a traditional big IP configuration, and it will do its best to spit out an equivalent AS3 declaration. And when I say do its best, is it's not always necessarily going to be a case where you're going to end up with a declaration that you can just plug in and it's going to work. You may need to do a little bit of massaging, but in our documentation, we do provide some good information about what those use cases would be and recommendations on how you would do that. So that's the quick overview on the automation toolchain. So next in the list here is another similar product, being another declarative API. But this one is really around automating and simplifying L3 failover in public cloud. And this is called the Cloud Failover extension. And again, this is a very nice and easy way to use a declarative API where you basically take a JSON document, which defines your configuration. You post this to the API endpoint, CFE in this example, and then CFE works all the magic under the covers to manage and enable failover events in public cloud. So this effectively replaces gratuitous ARP and kind of abstracts away the complexity that you're used to when managing failover events. Cloud solution templates. This is another pretty broad area of development here in the team. So this is all about CloudFormation templates for Azure, for AWS, ARM for Azure, GDM for Google, GCP. This is all about enabling or simplifying launching big IP instances within the public cloud. There's a lot of new development being done here. We're working on our V2 version of the templates, which is our next generation architecture using modular and nested templates. And these are available today, by the way. Ansible and Terraform is another very important set of tools for us. This is really important because using Ansible and Terraform, we're making it easier to start integrating automation to BIG-IP with third-party tools. So customers using Ansible, using Terraform, because now we have these declarative APIs, which simplify and abstract away a lot of complexity. Now it's a lot easier for us to start integrating BIG-IP deployment automation into Ansible and Terraform using the automation toolchain. And again, because we're boiling it down to being able to use a single API call, it makes it very easy to integrate into these third-party orchestration tools. And last but certainly not least, Container Ingress Services, or CIS, is another one of our products. This is an interesting one because this is really about BIG-IP integration into container orchestration environments. So being able to integrate BIG-IP into Kubernetes or OpenShift, for example, where BIG-IP can talk to the controller and now understands what's happening in the container environment, and it can provide application services for those containerized applications in a transparent way. You guys have any questions? Did I miss anything?
No, I think it's plenty of details.
All right.
Yeah, so I just not necessarily questions, but just on the okay, yeah, go ahead and go to your next slide, because that's what I was going to ask about. It's like the you know, a lot of people talk about the declarative onboarding and what that really means, and you know, you actually have to have an instance somewhere in order to start that process. So yeah, so that's where the cloud templates come in. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's good. So that's a perfect lead-in. So that's a good lead-in into what we call the automation lifecycle in the context of the automation tool chain. So there are some basic steps. So the first thing you need to do, obviously, is bootstrap and bring up the instance as appropriate in whatever cloud that you're working in. So in this case, bootstrapping here is where you would use the cloud templates that I referred to, whether it's a CloudFormation, ARM, or a GCP template. So that's the first step. You bring it up, you get the instance up and running. The next step is to do the onboarding of the BIG-IP, where again, this is really setting up more the global networking kind of parameters. So it's now up, available on the network, ready to go, and ready to accept in L4 through L7 services configuration. So here we're talking about your LTM, GTM, setting up your security policies, that whole wide range of things that you all know and love F5 BIG-IP for. And also here is FAST, like we talked about, the templating. So these are here in the same category because, again, FAST sits on top of AS3 as a templating engine. And then also part of the life cycle is as you're providing application services, obviously BIG-IP sees everything going back and forth. And so there's a lot of very useful information that our customers will want to gather and send off to an analytics engine to then learn about what's going on and perhaps use that in a way to dynamically adjust the configurations of the BIG-IP. And that's what the telemetry streaming extension is for. And one thing to note here, the telemetry streaming extension, the goal here is to enable and simplify export from BIG-IP, but this is not in itself an analytics engine. Its job is to simply get the data off the tool, off the box as quick as possible to an analytics consumer of your choice. We support many, you know, the usual suspects would be Splunk, Kafka, Azure, or AWS CloudWatch, Azure Log Analytics. There's a very long list. All right, the last slide, and I'm going to stop sharing slides. We'll have more of a conversation. Just want to talk just a little bit more about ACC. This is a relatively newer tool. This one is actually community supported. We recently made this available to a broader audience. And again, this is about enabling conversion from an existing BIG-IP configuration over to an AS3 declaration. It is CLI based. We also have an API front end on it, which is super cool. So you can use a REST API call to get your declaration out of it. And as input, you can use a UCF, UCS, SCF, or your bigip.conf. ACC will read through your configuration, and based on that, it will output an AS3 declaration, which is just a JSON file. And as I mentioned, you may need to manipulate the declarations, because not for those of you who know about AS3, not every possible thing supported on BigIP is supported in AS3, right? We've made a big concerted effort to focus on the items that customers really use in a very broad way. And so the ACC will tell you all the supported objects that it found that it was able to configure, and it will also give you information on what it found that it's not able to configure. And that could be because AS3 doesn't yet support it, or it could be that ACC doesn't yet support this AS3 feature. But, no worries. We've actually done a pretty good job of making sure that ACC stays very current with the latest version of AS3. So you will have really good coverage with respect to AS3. I mentioned it's community supported, and we have Ben here. He talked about this a little bit already. This is very, very cool. So he's been working on this F5 VS Code plugin that does all sorts of really amazing things to really put yet another layer of abstraction on top of all these tools, right? Should have mentioned up on top, one of the key purposes of doing what we're doing is to create layers of abstraction. We all know BigIP is a very advanced, pretty complex set of technologies. And what we want to do is put some abstraction on that, so you don't necessarily need to be an expert in all things F5 in order to configure and deploy your BigIP. So this plugin gives us now yet another layer of abstraction with the very, very pretty front end using VS Code, and makes it very easy to simplify authoring your automation toolchain declarations and deploying them to your BigIPs. So with that, I'm going to stop killing you with the slideware. I'll turn it back over, and we can talk a little bit more about where we are with the VS Code plugin.
Yeah, well, while you were away, we did talk a little bit about the VS Code plugin while you were working out your tech issues. But back to ACC, Ben, you shared about that last time you were on. And for those who weren't here, go back and watch that show, because it was a huge addition. And it's been asked about a lot in the DevCentral forums, out on other, even in our shows, it's been asked about. It's like, how do I take what I already have, not what's new, and convert it over? And so huge tool. And that came out right before Agility, didn't it, publicly?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so it's only been out a couple months, and so if you have been waiting and didn't hear any of the announcements, it's out there. So go check it out. So I did have a question on DO. We talked about some of those CloudFormation templates. Do we have anything for those who are just wanting to get started for like a VirtualBox or VMware? Anything for Vagrant? Or what's a Packer Vagrant for building out and getting a DO instance ready, or an instance ready for DO? Do you guys know anybody that's built anything like that? I think Tim Rupp back in the day had some remnants or whatever that he had put together, but I haven't seen if anything has happened on that front.
So what we see quite often happening today lately is when people just want to be able to do some testing and so on. Yeah, they may be using some stuff on premise, but I see more and more customers just using Terraform to spin up a BigIP in a public cloud and finish its configuration with something like DO. Because now it's super easy to just spin up something. It's a clean environment. You get a clean slate. You just push the relevant extension on top of it, either via Terraform, or you could be using Ben's VS Code extension, do your testing, and just once you're done, you just nuke your instance and forget it ever existed. That's really give a lot of customer benefit on making sure that they don't have legacy objects that are going to conflict with the existing project and so on. So that's an easy way for people now to just be able to test and play with BigIP easily. some people, definitely are using on-premise solution. But lately, at least that's what I saw, is people are just using Terraform to spin up the relevant version of Big IP and do any kind of testing they want, to be honest.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I should also add that for the public cloud, for folks who want to be able to sort of spin up a Big IP and kick the tires in public cloud, what we just made available just a few weeks ago in our new Cloud Solution Templates V2 are for AWS and Azure are these new standalone quick start templates, which is really cool. You just launch the template and you only have to input like 3 or 4 things, and these templates will spin up Big IP for you, soup to nuts, full stack setup with both ASM and LTM configured. And under the covers, it's using lots of different tools. It's using F5 Big IP runtime init, which is something that Big IP uses to install the automation tool chain, grab the configurations, and actually deploy the declarations to do your Big IP configurations.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to basically do a single click to bring up an entire Big IP with a little app on the back end as well, so you can just demonstrate that traffic is actually flowing through the bit. So it's a very nice way of kicking the tires. It's not meant for a production deployment, of course, but it's there to make it easy to spin these things up.
Do you have links for that you can share?
Yeah, I can let me put some links in the chat window here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and Dio is really convenient when you want just to onboard a Big IP. Maybe it's a new Big IP appliance. Maybe it's a new Big IP virtual edition you deployed somewhere else. Dio is really convenient to finish onboarding your Big IP instance, because the only thing you need to be able to use Dio is provide a management IP to your Big IP instance, then simply upload the Dio extension on it, and then you can just do a simple API call, and it's going to finalize the whole Big IP setup. So it could be about VLAN, self-IPs, licenses, module provisioning, obviously. Do you want just LTM or LTM DNS? But also, especially, it can do clustering for you. And we know clustering is a tedious process, because you need to click in several different locations, make sure that you set up your 2 Big IPs as peers, and so on. With Dio, with a single statement in your Dio declaration, which is probably 5 or 6 lines, we can set up your 2 Big IP as an HA pair. So what we have more and more people doing is, when they just want to upgrade an instance, what they may simply do is spin up a new Big IP virtual edition, or maybe VCMP guest, use Dio to onboard this Big IP, use As3 to migrate configuration from a device to another, and just nuke the old configuration. We have really cool example today of customer who use component like the automation toolchain, and they told us, oh, I had to do my upgrade campaign. I had to upgrade 180 Big IP, and it took 3 days. So when you hear this kind of story, for me, it's pretty exciting, because we know that upgrading Big IP can be time consuming. So to be able to automate this kind of operation so that you can forget about it and it's going to happen in the background, save you a lot of time. It's super cool. It's super compelling. And when you start moving to the cloud, this is how people expect to be able to build their infrastructure. They expect to use solutions like Terraform for infrastructure as code, and they just want to abstract away all the complexity of taking care of the infrastructure. And this is really what we are trying to do with my team, working on things like Terraform, Ansible, the automation toolchain, and so on, is try to make our customer life easier on how easy is it going to be to spin up a Big IP and expose my Big IP services through a self-service catalog. And this is really something for people listening to the stream, is my team, as overall at F5, we are really keen on customers' feedback. So if you have questions, pain point, and so on, we are really keen on hearing about it, which is why we wanted to do this office hour with you. So don't be shy on asking anything. Even if it's a difficult question, we will not shy away.
Oh man, I lost my thought, but I was going to ask about Oh, yeah, I was going to ask about, so internally there was a thread on DO, and what makes sense when you're using declarative the declarative interfaces, whether it's DO or AS3. When do you just spin up a new instance and deploy versus update deployments? So it's like you have that concept of immutability, and are you standing up something and not changing it? So obviously on the big IP, your services are going to change, but the underlying system itself, do you change that? Or if you need to change it, do you spin something else and then move workloads over to it? How does that process work from what you guys recommend? I know you can do a lot of different things, but from a recommendation standpoint, what's the goal?
So when you're using AS3 directly, so AS3 is, I should have mentioned this, it's important. AS3 is both atomic and idempotent. So one of the nice things about AS3 is when, actually all the automation toolchain components are, but let's talk a little bit about AS3. When you deploy a configuration with AS3, and then you later want to update that configuration, you can simply edit that declaration with that change. So for example, if you want to add a pool member, you just go into the declaration and you add the pool member, and then you resubmit the declaration. What AS3 will do is it will take a look at what you've submitted versus what it knows what was last submitted, and it will calculate basically what has changed. So it's not going to try to reapply everything all over again. It's going to determine, well, what's new here. And so in this case, it's going to say, oh, I see the only thing that's changed here is you want to add a new pool member. And AS3 will do effectively that. It will say, go ahead and add this new pool member. It will do that configuration for you. So if you go back and you apply the exact same configuration again, AS3 will tell you, hey, there's nothing to change here, so it's a no op. I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah,
now,
and go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to add to it, I really see two different patterns on how people do automation with their big IPs. I would say overall in private cloud, it's more traditional. So they have an HA pair. It's going to be fairly standard, traditional active passive. And when they start working on automation and orchestration, the instance is not going to disappear. They're going to remain, and they're mostly going to do configuration management on top of it. So when something new is happening, they are just going to deploy the new service on top of the existing configuration. And as Kevin highlighted, through tools like S3 and Ansible, for example, with idempotency anywhere, nothing is going to change for existing object, and we are just going to push always the same stuff anywhere. So on private cloud, it's more traditional things. Instance remain for a while. When they need to upgrade it, they will just upgrade the instance itself. They are not going to really have any consideration about immutability and new instance deployment for new configuration. But on public cloud, it's really a different story, because when moving to public cloud, people want to enforce more cloud native pattern like autoscale. And that's where usually we have discussion with customer on, okay, I want to be able to have an architecture where my big IP are going to scale as needed. And they want it to scale out. So that means if our instances are reaching capacity, we want to add more instance on the side. And so when you start getting into those patterns, you cannot stick to the traditional HA pattern, obviously. So you need to have multiple big IP working together. And that's where usually we start talking about immutability and so on. Immutability meaning that if you need to change something from a configuration standpoint, you don't do a configuration update. You spin up a new instance with the updated configuration, and once it's alive and kicking, you kill the old instance, what we call pave and nuke. So in public cloud, we see much more people looking into immutable best practices and how can you do this kind of architecture where if you need to update your web application firewall policy, we are going to create a new overall big IP state, spin up a new big IP or set of big IP with this new configuration. And once it's alive, slowly transition traffic to this new component and kill the old one. Same thing from an upgrade perspective. You don't do upgrade in a traditional manner. You spin up new big IPs. Once they are properly set up, active, ready to process traffic, you killed the old one. So we still see both. I don't really see customers trying to do scaling out architecture on premises. So that's really heavily for public cloud deployment. Some customers obviously are still going to do lift and shift, but we have some customers who created several clusters of 5 big IPs or more that can scale on demand. That's something we see heavily in the retail industry, for example, where they want to be able to scale out massively for the period around Christmas, stop touching anything, and they will expect the architecture to self-heal if something is happening.
Yeah, well, one of the cool things I thought about while you were talking about, upgrades is that, in the AS3 world, right? You don't have to go through this like laborious, for some customers, it's like weeks or months of upgrading like 70 to 100 boxes where they have to go through, upgrade the system, check everything's right. If all of your config objects are in AS3, it's just, deploy a new one and go. Not that you haven't tested it before, but once you've tested that everything is working as expected in your lab environment for that particular app service, you don't have to worry about the niches of upgrading from like a 13.1 to a 15.1 or whatever. You just deploy a 15.1, apply your declaration, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and we have some customer doing exactly this. There is a customer in America, a big automotive customer. This is what they did. They needed to move to bigger instances. And so instead of trying to upgrade their existing instances, they just deployed new instances on the side, and they migrated 10,000 applications in 2 days between those two different clusters, I believe, Kevin, or something like this. But this was by using AS3, because with AS3, you can just require through a single API called the state of your device. So you're going to get all your application services, and then you can just replay it on another device. And the whole configuration is going to be replicated on the fly. This way, you don't have to go through the upgrade process, make sure everything works as expected, and so on. So that's something we see more and more often, how people want to try to use pave and nuke patterns to do upgrade and so on, because it's easier to automate. Trying to automate the upgrade of a local device on itself is much more challenging.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a paradigm shift too, right? Because for those who have legacy applications and they've done things a certain way for 15, 20 years, going into a new paradigm and you try to apply the old ways of doing things into the new systems, maybe you can make it work, but it's definitely less optimal and fraught with danger.
Yeah, and people sometimes don't have yet the skill set to do it, so they're looking for guidance, recommendation on how to do it, and so on. And there is always a question about, okay, I have what we call brownfield configuration, which is not automated and so on. So how can I take my brownfield configuration and move it into something like AS3, and they want F5 to give them some guidance to do it and so on. And now one really good guidance we can give is look into the VS Code extension from Ben, because that's going to do most of the job for you. And the user experience is going to be much, much nicer. So,
yeah. You think about the simple machines of life, right? The levers and the the wheel and all that. And like VS Code is that for this, right? Or that the extension in VS Code. We had a comment here from Daniel, Nick, when you were talking. It's like faith in humanity restored. I'm glad to hear people are not using L3 failover in public clouds.
I would say people are trying to get away from it. I'm not saying nobody is doing it. This is frankly why we created Cloud Failover extension, to make it easier to do L3 failover in public cloud. So I'm sorry, Daniel, but we are getting there, but step by step. But absolutely, people want to start considering new ways to do failover, whether it's about using DNS, for example, and other method to steer traffic between instances. Absolutely. We are going to get there.
Yeah. Well, I had a question just in general and the for AS3 and doing declarations. If you have say you have 30 different services that you want to manage. Do you see customers doing, one giant declaration for all 30, or are they breaking out everything into individual services and having a declaration for each, or some amalgamation of the two?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and
Yes.
so generally speaking, what our customers tend to do is break down declarations down to the smallest possible configuration. So I didn't mention, and Jason, so good that you brought this up. So we support this notion of tenancy on AS3 to handle this very specific question. So we know that there are going to be multiple application owners who are going to want to configure AS3 for those various apps. And so we knew from the start that we needed a way to kind of garden wall off all these applications across these different owners. So in AS3, we support the notion of tenants, which is really big IP administrative partitions. So in your example, you could have 30 apps, and if you go to one extreme, each of these apps has its own owner, in which case you would have 30 different tenants set up with an app in each of those tenants. We do see a lot of customers doing that for simplicity. Or you could go to the other extreme where a customer says, well, I have one owner and I'm going to have one person really touching things here, in which case there's certainly no problem with deploying a declaration with all 30 applications within one tenant. So you can do it either way, but we've seen in real life scenarios, our customers tend to try to boil things down to an application per tenant where they can.
Okay. And I don't know, and maybe this is just getting too far down in the weeds, but I remember with the imperative REST interface, if your post gets too big, there's kind of a performance, you kind of hit some performance problems. So for the declaration, for the people who are doing declarations to AS3, that declaration gets too big. Does that hit performance problems on the iControl LX interface? Or do you guys know?
Oh yeah, yeah. So yes, so we are using the same architecture. AS3 is using the same framework than our iControl REST API. So depending on how you intend to do automation with regards to big IP control plane, we share some best practices customers should think about doing when they want to use our API in general. One of them is to increase the memory allocated to our control plane. One way to do it is in the module provisioning section, set management to large. Another one is to go and modify a DB variable called extra MB. And our recommendation is to allocate 500 meg to 1 gig, extra gig memory to the control plane. That's going to make the overall big IP control plane API scale much more and be able to handle large declaration as you're talking about, Jason.
Okay.
This is documented on Cloud Docs, which is where we document all our solution, clouddocs.f5.com. And we try to provide those best practices because we don't want customers to be burnt due to a lack of specific documentation related to performance and sizing.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. Just, we talked about some of the tooling around the automation tool chain, and I know we have some partnerships with Ansible and HashiCorp and all that. So, when Ansible, when Terraform, when both, how are we guiding customers in that regard? Or are we just really taking the lead from them and helping them in that, in their own journey?
So it's a tricky question. So I say overall, usually what people like to do is we see two different use cases, one for Ansible, one for Terraform. Usually people really enjoy using Ansible for configuration management. So to be able to manipulate your configuration from an application services perspective on big IP. Ansible is really good at doing it. It's fairly straightforward, and it's something that it does really well. On the other hand, the use case for Terraform usually is really around what we call infrastructure as code. Because what's really appealing with Terraform is it stores the state of your infrastructure, which means you explain what is the expected end state of your infrastructure, and it's going to abstract away all the complexity from an implementation perspective. And that's something really powerful from an infrastructure as code perspective. So usually when people can afford multiple tools, we see people really using Terraform purely for infrastructure as code, and on top of it, using Ansible for configuration management. And this way you get the best of both worlds. But reality-wise perspective, we know that the traditional big IP owner or the DevOps teams from our customer, they don't often just decide to standardize on 2 different tools for 2 different use cases. So usually what really happens is customers are going to come to us to say, hey, we decided to standardize on Ansible or Ansible Tower or Terraform. What do you have for us? What is your recommendation? So reality-wise perspective, usually our customers are going to pick one or the other, and they're going to want to make sure that F5 is going to provide the same use cases for both solutions. We cannot just focus on infrastructure as code use cases for Terraform and configuration management use cases for Ansible, because we have some customers, for example, standardizing on Terraform, and they want to do big IP lifecycle and configuration management with Terraform. So reality is people are usually going to use one or the other, but not fairly rare. I see people using both. They would love to, but they either don't have the skill set or it's just too much technology for a small team.
Okay. So the reality, just to summarize real quick, the reality is, most one or the other, but the best of both worlds would be to use both Terraform for the infrastructure side and Ansible for the configuration management.
Yeah, and then people may have their personal opinion, so it's a question potentially of taste and so on. So
yeah, okay,
no judgment here.
Cool. Well, community, you have a few minutes left. If you have a question, get it in here, and I'm going to just ask each of the 3 of you, a parting thought on the state of where we are with automation, where anything on the horizon that you're especially looking forward to, either with F5 tools or some of the industry tools that F5 plugs into.
So I guess the one thing I would like to say is just to stress how strategic what we're doing is to the company. And we're starting to see this kind of thing being a lot more strategic just across the industry. But, at F5, the declarative APIs and automation has become a pretty big focus. And you'll start to see that across products and platforms moving forward with an API-first approach and ensuring that pretty much whatever you need to do, it's got to be automated. And there's a big focus here at F5. It's very strategic.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Kevin. Yep. What about you, Ben?
So, it's definitely exciting times to be doing this stuff in our industry. The automated tool chain has come a long ways with support and everything that they do. We've got the VS Code extension to really kind of help integrate the development workflows. And, customers are really starting to pick up on this stuff, and we're starting to see a lot of success and a lot of value being driven out in the field. And, like we're hearing is that customers are moving hundreds of applications within days. They're redeploying entire infrastructure, and they're really starting to drive the value and kind of get the business payback of using automation across the board. So it's super exciting to really help our customers transition into the next phase of things. As we kind of close up in parts, some of the things I'm thinking about and working on next is how can I integrate some of these workflows and these tools directly into GitHub Actions, or kind of, obfuscate some of these tools and just kind of make it turnkey for some of those customers that are still trying to automate the deployment of even, As3, right? So definitely really excited to kind of get back with the team and talk about what I've been working on the next couple months.
That's cool. And Nick, the brainchild behind this whole thing.
So I think Ben and Kevin provided really the key things, and I'm fully in agreement with what they said. My only last recommendation would be the automation and ecosystem team is really keen on getting feedback. We are really iterating on our roadmap, and we are releasing our solution in an agile manner. So we have a release every 1 month and a half 2 months maximum. And it's really based on customer feedback. So if you are starting your journey, or if you are already well advanced in your journey, invite us to hear about what you've been doing, what works well, what doesn't work, because we are reaching a state, as Ben highlighted, where we can already do a lot of cool stuff. Quick upgrade, pave and nuke, auto scale, and so on. But to get to the next milestone, we need to hear more from our customer on what works, again, what doesn't. How could we make your user experience even better and more efficient? My team is really keen on getting feedback, and we are committed to meet your expectation. So feel free to reach to us, feel free to reach to my team, and we will make sure that you're going to get what you need quickly.
All right.
Hey, really quick, Nick, what's the best way to reach out to you and your team?
I would say you have two different ways. If it's just a formal way, you can open a GitHub issue with regards to the relevant project, As3, DO, Telemetry Streaming, everything is on GitHub. We will hear about your feedback, sort your issue. If it's a roadmap item, we are going to put it in our roadmap, and we are just going to keep track about it. If you want to have a more advanced discussion, I would say reach to your account team, explain that you would like to have a discussion with the automation and ecosystem team from F5, and we will figure out something. My team is super flexible. I am flexible. We will make it happen.
Yep.
Awesome.
I believe that. This is awesome. I tell you what, you guys have all mentioned this is strategic. Kevin, you mentioned that. Ben, you mentioned, we want to help people along this journey. And Nick, your team is always available and flexible. And I just think about, I think our customers at F5 run the gamut from those that are fully automated and they automate all the things like we kind of talked about earlier. And then those that are just beginning this journey. And I appreciate all of you to say, hey, regardless of where you are on that journey, welcome and come with us. Let's do this thing, right? And because this is where we have to go, right?
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Awesome.
And obviously, thank you to Jason and John to set this up. That was a really good experience. And if people believe it could be beneficial to do it again in the future, you should let us know.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely have you guys back in the future, and we'll get the community talking a little bit. Maybe it's a little too early on a Tuesday morning. Maybe we'll have to do like a 10 o'clock at night. Everybody's done with their day. They've been gaming for a couple hours. They're loose, and
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep. Jason, we need to figure out a way to completely automate our live stream show.
There you go.
People talk for us. Nicholas could come on and just voices start appearing, and I don't know, answering questions.
Right.
Let's do it.
Ben, you're getting some love here. Very useful. Thanks for the insights.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of people. Yep. Way to go, Donnie. Yeah, and Ben.
Yep. Cool. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
man. Always
so
good
the
to hear
community. The call to action here is speak up, because you've got a very willing team to build what you're looking for, and obviously where it makes sense for your needs and the abilities of the products and the needs of the larger community. But go open issues on GitHub for those projects as you see enhancements or bugs or whatnot. And here's a comment. Now microservices anywhere, FICIS plus Kubernetes, true love, still waiting for more features of CRD. Yeah, I'm sure that's coming. They built something, and maybe it's not Kevin's team. Let me bring Kevin back on real quick. So the link, I forget what they called it. I'm sorry, I should know this, but the CIS and KIS Ingress link. Thank you.
Ingress link.
Ingress link, bringing the two worlds together between Nginx and then Big IP, but all kind of flowing into that Kubernetes experience. But that's not your team that does the Ingress link.
That is our team. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's Nicola's engineering teams are driving that.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I'll let you go again for real this time.
No worries.
And then also there was another tool. It's not really at the end state of automation, but the image builder, where you can kind of pick and choose interfaces and all that, and that's one of those tools out there as well. So anyway, well, we're at time.
Yeah, we're at time, and like you said, man, this team is they're willing and they're definitely able, and they're pushing forward with all this. And so, to the community, if you have feedback, then your stuff, you might as well have them build the stuff that you want to see, right?
Exactly.
So, because they're going to start building, man. And they're doing great work. So
that's
right.
Awesome. So, just for our perspective, we've got, I've got You Want Answers on Thursday. So I won't have John with me on Thursday, 12:30 Pacific. But I will have a special appearance by the Lori McVitie.
Nice.
Thursday's You Want Answers, titled Getting Edgy With It. And little Will Smith play on words there from Getting Jiggy With It. But we're gonna talk about the edge and what the heck is the edge, because it is at least when you hear edge 1.0 and 1.5 and 2.0 and you're like, I don't even know what the edge is. So let's stop with the numbers and let's back the truck up. And
right.
So we'll dig into that on Thursday, as well as we'll get to some Q&A in DevCentral as well. But we're gonna start the first half of the show at least. We'll be talking about the edge. So
that'll be awesome, man. Yeah, looking forward to that. Looking forward to that. Jason, as they say, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. So,
I know, absolutely. When just from a pop culture sake, talking about the edge, so it's like they got the Will Smith reference with Getting Edgy With It, and then it's like, well, then I've got the Edge from U2, and I'm thinking, it's like I got to have him riffing on a guitar, and then of course what you said, living on the edge, and doing a little Aerosmith, and so it's like, man, I got a lot of pop culture opportunity in this show.
Yeah, on the edge of glory, all that stuff. Yeah,
there you go.
Tons of it, man.
Who was on the edge of glory? Which one's that? Is that Bonnie Tyler?
Was that Lady Gaga? Maybe I'd have to look that one up.
Oh yeah,
maybe I should have
really old school.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but anyway, hey community, thanks for joining us today. It was a great show. And we'll have to do office hours again. And, we'll do automation and orchestration office hours, but maybe we'll do office hours with some other groups as well. So if you have interest in, say, the ASM team or the, the AFM team, or, you want to dig into the Velos hardware stuff, anything that you think you would like an office hours on, where you just get to pepper us with questions, drop that in the comments, and we'll see if we can schedule some time with those groups as well. So John, as always, great show. And I'll see you back a week from Thursday. Week. But and community, I'll see you on Thursday, 12:30 Pacific. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.